organization, most specifically at a leadership and a board level. One of the founding principles, for those of you who don't know, as to why CFF was formed 7 years ago, was unbelievably, but now believably, based on the principle of bringing security leaders together with organizational leaders at a C level and a board level. At that point in time, 7 years ago, it's kind of hard to believe, but cybersecurity and security was really viewed as an IT issue. Fast forward to now, and I think you're very hard pressed to not see any security leader that is part of organizational discussions at a C-suite level and a board level on a daily basis. So Andrea's points in discussion are a great lead into this next panel. I'm inviting Val and Tim Brown up on the stage.
Thank you, Catherine. All right. Well, Tim, we have talked about doing this for quite some time, and now you're here, and thank you for your time. And
absolutely.
First of all, thank you for all the service. I mean, this was, I'm sure the people in San Antonio and Austin and now the entire 35 corridor know you well, but overall the world knows about the work that you're doing. So for those that are probably not directly connected to industry, I just wanted to give you, a chance to introduce yourself, and then we'll talk about your story.
Oh, absolutely. So Tim Brown, I am the CISO for SolarWinds. So most people heard of SolarWinds like about 2 years ago, December 12th, 2020, we had a major cybersecurity incident that really affected a lot in the world, right? And that's the key, that the effect on us was pretty major, but then the effect that everybody had to do from a research perspective, everybody had to do from am I running a version that was affected? So essentially what happened was that we were a victim of a cyber attack, a victim of a nation state attack. So the Russian SVR essentially attacked us to be able to get to really 4 agencies of the world. And that was their primary target, was really what we see is under 100 customers went to a secondary attack. And out of those 100, we believe the general target was 4 agencies. So essentially the Russian SVR was saying, how do I get into agencies? What do I do to get to these agencies? How do I compromise that agency? And they said, SolarWinds is here. So their campaign started early on, about 1.5 years of email reconnaissance.
Yeah.
So their first step was to look at email and be able to compromise email, Office 365. With that, they could actually physically read emails. And what they were doing is profiling the company. So they profiled the company for about 1 year and said, okay, this is how they develop code. This is what they look like. This is what their models are. And then they were able to insert a test run in October. They were able to say, hey, this is how I can try to get into the system. They didn't insert source code into our repository. They inserted source code into our supply chain.
Yeah.
So the way we build products, you go through source code control, and you go through build systems, and eventually you get to product. They knew that if they had inserted into source code repository, they would be found. So everything about them was stealth, quiet, always trying to evade detection. So they did a test run, October. Just one product got it, and they proved that they could do it. So they left, came back in February with 2,500 lines of code, which became Sunburst, Sunspot, inserted there. And then they left that in place, essentially, or kept putting it in place for about 3 months, March to June. Then they left in June, and they shut down their command and control servers in October. So very well organized attack with the whole idea of being as stealth, as quiet, as mission centric. They weren't out making noise everywhere. And then the code they dropped did the same thing. Wouldn't run inside of our environment, was blacklisted, wouldn't run inside Microsoft, wouldn't run inside a host of other companies. Just said, nope, just if you see you're in there, don't start, right? They also waited 14 days before they started. So just again, people put software in, they test their software, and then they go back away, right? So again, thoughtful. So when I look at the attack, people say sophisticated. I like to say thoughtful because nothing was hard.
Yeah.
Right? Waiting 14 days before you start?
Yeah,
Easy,
it's
right?
easy, right?
Not hard.
It's deliberate, quiet, very
Deliberately
mission
quiet,
oriented.
deliberately looking to perform their mission, right? And originally we had thought that 9 agencies had been affected. GAO report came out saying that 4 agencies were affected, going to a second stage. Now, we don't discount the fact that 4 agencies were affected. We don't, and we'll never know what happened in those 4 agencies. Because the code essentially gave you privileged access behind the scenes, right? That's what it did. It gave you privileged access to the Windows machine that was running Orion. And then attempts were made to move laterally within that environment. So we don't know what the downstream effect of the 4 were, but we know it could have been a lot worse, right? So when you think of why we say that could be a lot worse and why outside of our incident, things like supply chain have become so important and people are talking about supply chain a lot more and all of those things, it's really because of the damage that could be done, could have been done. Orion as a network management system, SolarWinds counts around 200,000 customers, 200,000 to 300,000 customers. So we're just about everywhere. And our flagship product called Orion is network management. Been there for 20 years, used in many places. It has, in order to do network management, it has access to your network.
Yeah.
Therefore, what if this was a piece of controller code for our power systems? Right? What if it was a controller code for some of the other places, some of the critical manufacturers that we have? So that is why the potential has brought up supply chain so much now, because of the potential of saying, do we know it's there? Well, it costs so little, it didn't end up being one of the components that people looked at heavily, because our prices range from 5,000 to hundreds of thousands. But a network admin says, "Oh, I want to monitor my network. Let me put it here," right? And it doesn't get any scrutiny of what access it has. So a lot of the supply chain talk now is, well, if something is going to touch my network, if something is going to monitor my database, if something is going to monitor my environment, then I absolutely need to have it reviewed in the right way. I need to know it exists. Because, thousands of customers calling, you end up understanding kind of where they fit. One of the main themes was they didn't know where it was. They didn't know what version it was. And people were asking, is this in my environment? And folks just didn't know. So that spurred a lot of the secondary conversations, and the conversations for good. So that's what we really look like from an incident. How do you get to the good, right? How do you help the industry? How do you help the world?
No, I think, we all take lessons from the biggest tragedies or biggest, issues that have this impact, right? And I think you mentioned 2 things. One is the extent of SolarWinds already presence, right? That is there. And the other thing is the adjacency to the core cyber or the assets that it's connecting to. And network is the most critical piece because that connects everything together. So definitely, this deliberate attempt of getting to down the supply chain to where this software is, so it was very well thought out, and only a nation state attack could kind of determine that. But now that recipe is out for the organized criminal world to do the same thing. So I think it's natural that we look at the supply chain as a whole and see what other pieces touch our assets. So I'm glad you brought it up.
And the way I look at supply chain is really that you have little supply chain, which is okay, SolarWinds is built with these components, these open source things. Here are all of our libraries inside of what SolarWinds is or Orion is. And producing an SBOM for that type of information, a software bill of materials.
Right.
Right? And there's a lot of work going on in that. So the thing about that is little supply chain. What is actually kind of more important is big supply chain.
Right.
What's in our power grid, right? What components are in our
You have to literally go to the business and break it down to the different things that enable the business to run. And most of it is technology now.
Exactly.
Right? Let me take another angle at this. Like, we talked about the type of attack, the deconstruction of what our analysis is and where it impacted. Let's talk about the business side of it. I mean, as a business, you had to really bounce back and address this crisis that faced you, right? So
yeah, absolutely. So, once this occurred, it was, from a news perspective, from another perspective, yes, I was on 60 Minutes the day before. My mother called and said, "Hey, isn't that your company? Are you okay?" But the kind of the world spirals for a while, right? So you have nations of the world calling you the first week. So
Right.
yes, nations call you. And they're saying, I have a critical program. I think for the US, it was Project Warp Speed, which was creating the COVID vaccine.
Right.
Right. And they were saying, is anybody on this list part of your customer base? And were they running an affected version? Right. And then we got those same messages from all the other nations of the world. Then you get the largest customers of the world, the largest companies of the world. Then you have, then you have your FBI. Then you have CISA, who was a fantastic partner through this. If anybody ever goes through, incidents, CISA pure mission is to be able to amplify truth.
Yeah.
And amplifying truth was so important during this.
Right.
That what versions are affected and what should I do? So we agreed very much with CISA's guidance, and we matched that guidance. So really, for the first few months, I probably didn't have anybody say anything nice about me in the press and across the world. Then it starts shifting, right? Our focus was customers. Our focus was getting them correct, getting them correct, getting them correct. Our marketing team is a few people. We couldn't outmarket the Wall Street Journal and CNN. And
there's a whole machine that was taking this news and just, ruminating facts that they interpreted as.
Exactly. And the amount of the amount of incorrect information out there was, no, we did not fix the election. No, we did not have our company
Add
rated
that
by
to
the
it,
FBI.
right? And in general situation, it would be bad already.
Right. And the other part that we saw that was interesting is that since SolarWinds was a pretty interesting name, right? It's a name people heard of. Do you know what Microsoft called our threat actor?
What was that?
Nubellium. You ever heard the word Nubellium? No. So FireEye Mandiant, it's known as APT-29.
Yeah.
And in the press, what you would hear is SolarWinds attacks XYZ. And it was actually the SolarWinds attacker, or APT-29, attacked XYZ. In many instances, SolarWinds wasn't even they weren't even a SolarWinds customer, right? But the reference of the attacker.
It was very sticky because, it started with SolarWinds. So it was very difficult, I believe, for you to disassociate that, And I think that's where the truth matters, right? I mean, where do you disassociate? And it became the anti-marketing of marketing.
Absolutely. So with all of that, right, our focus on customers, our focus on getting them right, our focus on moving them forward, our focus on telling the truth, our focus on being transparent really resulted in the company doing fine through this incident, right? We had hiccups, but
of course,
in
this
general,
is a major event.
Yeah, it was not an extinction event by any means.
Right.
Yeah, before the incident, we were running in the low 90s from a renewal rate. We're still now running in the low 90s of a renewal rate. We dropped down to the 80s during the first months of it.
Yeah. Tell me something about the transparency. That word really caught my attention because, this is a choice. And I think many in the industry don't make that choice wisely, right? ultimately truth prevails. So if you're transparent from the
Yeah,
beginning.
ultimate, we did okay, right? Not that it wasn't painful.
Yeah, of course it
right?
was painful, yeah.
But we did prevail and continue to grow and continue to have a viable company. And I think that's a big lesson for people, is that if you treat your customers well, if you treat everybody else well. I was at a U.S. Army TechNet conference down in Augusta about a month ago. And we do a little presentation on what happened, what we've been doing since. And we really, after the incident, did a lot of things to show excellence, right? We stopped development for 6 months on new features. We only focused on security. We invented brand new build systems that are extremely resilient to attack. We did all of these things. And after my presentation with the Army, a general in the front says, "Oh, Tim, can I have the mic?" And of course, right? And he is a general in charge of cyber for the Army. And he said, "Okay, everybody in this room, here's what you know. This is what you should expect from all of your vendors." They called me the day after the incident. They called me 3 days after the incident. They kept me informed through the whole thing. This is exactly what you want from a vendor. So the incident allowed us to show kind of excellence, right?
I think that's a company culture also reflects a lot of that, right? I mean, can you tell a little bit about your leadership team?
Yeah.
And also, I believe you had a lot of guidance coming from many different ways. Of course, there are thousands of vendors always tell you, like, we could have prevented this.
Yeah, so we had a lot of guidance. We had a very supportive, both board as well as supportive exec team. And really the idea was we had a couple of themes, right? All under the Secure by Design theme, but it was, customers first always. We put programs in place called, Ryan Assistance Program to get customers up to the right versions. We answered questions. We became much more open from a legal perspective as well as from a policy and procedure perspective. So you share a lot more. And the whole industry is being kind of forced into sharing more, because what we did was share more. How do you develop software? Oh, here are the things that
So
we
when
do.
is the book coming out?
Right? How do you protect your environment, right? Here are the things that we do. So the expectation is that we are more sharing as a vendor community.
Yeah.
And that means that we create a better environment. The other thing that the incident did is that it inserted probably billions of dollars into the security budgets of CISOs around the world.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
people asked, boards asked, well, could this happen to me? And smart CISOs said, of course it could. Well, what do you need, right? And so many CISOs have thanked me for helping with their budget. But each one of those says, okay, well, we became more resilient as a world because of the event, right? And the good part can outweigh the kind of the bad part. But uncomfortable, absolutely.
It is true.
Right? Not I wish on anybody to go through.
I was going to go ask that, like, personally, do you ever think you'll be in this spotlight?
Yeah, so personally, I think I lost about 25 pounds in the first 4 weeks, simply because we had, days that ended at 2 a.m., right? And you continue to go through things. Couple lessons, right? Always bring in help, right? Bring in help that's been through it before. Don't try to go alone, because it's almost impossible. Those things will really help you along that path incredibly well. You really do need to grow a hard shell for a while. Industry, the press finally turned around 6 months with an article of unprecedented attack, unprecedented response. Right, that's all we could ask for.
I think that is true, and I think people realized after all that this could happen to anyone. The way you handle this is important.
Yeah.
And I think I congratulate you and your leadership team and those who supported you through that, for making it work and making this business, which is a I think intricate part of the supply chain, be a viable business.
Absolutely. So one of the things for this group and this conference, right, the number of skills that you need for those types of incidents, the number of skills that I need in my cyber team are not just limited to engineering skills and not just limited to cybersecurity skills, right? When we're training cybersecurity professionals of the future, that means psychologists. That means absolutely communications is critical, people skills critical. So it's not just about technical, right? We need people to communicate. We need people to communicate well. So those are the things, yeah, this is a little bit of a different kind of audience from a conference perspective for me, but those are the things that we really need from a workforce development. And you're absolutely correct that our workforce is, we're still lacking. We're still lacking in the skills that folks need. Everybody wants cyber talent. So how do we continue to excite people to get into it? I think it is that we don't necessarily say, oh, you have to be in engineering, you have to be a STEM, you have to be a this, right? Because we need people to think outside the box.
Absolutely. No, I think along with technical skill, you need so many other to make it a well-rounded professional, right? Because cyber is not just technical.
Right.
You just, I think we're talking to you as an example of all that well-roundedness it requires to address and, protect a business, manage the risk, and also lead a team.
Absolutely, right? And so, I think that's one of the mistakes we often do when we're training people. We think it's all about red team. We think it's all about technology. But I need you to be able to write well, right? I need to be able to communicate well. I need you to be able to talk to my customer about their issue. So it goes beyond technical skills.
Excellent. Well, this was very insightful as always. Thank you for sharing, Tim. You have been a wealth of knowledge. Just it came out the way it had to. But through this lens, we have seen your personal leadership, we have seen your business leadership, and of course, admire you for all that you brought in. So please join me in thanking, a really resilient leader, both from a cybersecurity industry as well as from the business and the local here. So a round of applause, please, for Tim Brown.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Tim.